Professional actors, you go in and just jump in and do it, best of your ability.
Let me say, can I say one thing?
please.
To me, the great Stanley Kubrick was an actor's enemy. And I can point to movies that he's done, the worst.
Every day, I bring you another wild story from Hollywood's golden age. The secrets, the scandals, and the unforgettable moments that built an era like no other. If you want to keep these memories alive with me, hit that subscribe button. It costs nothing, but it means everything. Thank you for sticking around. Now let's get into it, because Robert Duvall just broke his silence, and Hollywood is losing its mind. After 6 long decades of keeping quiet, the 94-year-old legend finally confessed there were 4 people in the industry he just couldn't stand, not even for a single minute throughout his entire career. That's right, the man everyone thought was pure discipline and class had a hidden list, and it's got people talking. Duvall, often hailed as the gold standard of professionalism, has always been seen as Hollywood's calm, collected giant, respected, admired, the kind of actor everyone wanted to learn from. But behind that steady gaze and gentlemanly charm, he was carrying grudges that never really disappeared. And now, in an interview that's got everyone from directors to fans completely stunned, the Oscar-winning icon who helped shape modern cinema finally let it out. The truth he'd kept locked up for years. "I've kept my mouth shut for decades," Duvall reportedly said. "But at this age, what am I waiting for?" Those words hit like a thunderclap across Hollywood. Because when a man like Robert Duvall decides to speak, you know the story's about to get real. It's time to tell the truth. That's what Robert Duvall said, and those words tore through Hollywood like a lightning bolt. Not just because of what he said, but because he said it. The man everyone thought would take the industry's biggest secrets to his grave suddenly opened up, and it's shaking the town to its core. For Duvall to finally speak out after more than 50 years means those grudges cut deep, deep enough to follow him right into his 90s. Sources close to him say these weren't just petty arguments or small creative spats. No, these were full-blown clashes that changed entire movies, shifted performances, and might have even rewritten parts of Hollywood history. Can you imagine how different those legendary films could have been if peace had ruled those sets instead of quiet resentment? Now that Duvall's finally breaking his silence, everyone's on edge, desperate to know the same thing. Who are the 4 names? What truth has been hiding behind all those red carpet smiles, polished speeches, and fake award show friendships? But before that shocking list drops, we need to understand why a man like Robert Duvall, known for his privacy, grace, and control, finally decided to spill. Insiders say it wasn't anger that drove him. It was something deeper. Reflection. That point in life when legacy means more than reputation and the truth feels heavier than silence. One longtime associate who asked to remain anonymous revealed something stunning. He's been watching all these new documentaries rewriting the past, showing harmony where there was tension and friendship where there was jealousy. That false storytelling reportedly ate at him for years. The breaking point came during a career tribute, a night meant to celebrate his greatness. Sitting quietly in the crowd, Duvall watched clips from his most iconic scenes, moments shared with actors he couldn't stand. The audience cheered wildly. The narrator praised creative partnerships and lifelong respect. But Duvall just sat there, stone-faced, simmering inside. Later, he told his interviewer exactly how that night pushed him to finally speak. And it changed everything. I sat there listening to all that fake talk about mutual respect and creative partnerships while I remembered the truth, Duvall confessed. One of those people used to step on my lines just to ruin takes, and another tried to get me fired from a role that ended up defining my career. That was it, the moment the legend finally snapped. At 94 years old, with an Oscar, countless nominations, and a legacy carved into Hollywood's history books, Duvall decided he had nothing left to protect. The masks, the make-believe, the industry illusions, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was truth. He reportedly told close friends he wanted the next generation of actors to see the real Hollywood, not the one dressed up in magazine smiles and red carpet lies. He said he wanted these young actors to know, one insider revealed, even the greatest films aren't always born from peace. Sometimes they come out of jealousy, ego, and straight-up chaos behind the camera. Then came the bombshell that shook the industry to its core, the first name on Robert Duvall's secret list, Dustin Hoffman, the man Duvall called the credit thief who never stopped. And trust me, that's just the beginning. Once upon a time, Hoffman and Duvall were inseparable. Two broke dreamers in New York, splitting rent, sharing cold coffee, and chasing the same impossible dream. Dustin and I were struggling actors together in New York, Duvall recalled. We were friends, or at least I thought we were. But as the years rolled on and success finally came knocking, Duvall discovered that friendship meant something very different to Dustin Hoffman. What once looked like brotherhood started to feel like betrayal, and that's where their story took a turn that Hollywood never saw coming. In the early 1960s, their friendship looked unshakable. Two hungry young actors grinding through endless nights, running lines, lifting each other up, and dreaming about the big break that felt just out of reach. But before long, Duvall started noticing something that didn't sit right. His own creative ideas, the ones he'd spent weeks perfecting, started showing up in Dustin Hoffman's auditions. I'd worked for weeks on a specific interpretation for an audition, Duvall explained. I'd practice it in our tiny apartment, rehearse every pause and inflection, and then suddenly Dustin would show up for the same role, using my exact approach, sometimes word for word. When Hoffman landed parts using those ideas, he'd casually tell others that Duvall had inspired him. But Duvall wasn't buying that. "That's just a fancy word for theft," he snapped. The friendship was already cracking, and even as their careers skyrocketed, that tension never really faded. By 1969, Duvall was shooting True Grit, playing the outlaw Ned Pepper, while Hoffman was deep in prep for Midnight Cowboy. Duvall recalled, "He used to call me all the time, asking for advice. I spent hours helping him find Ratso Rizzo's voice. But later, when Duvall read an interview where Hoffman bragged about developing the iconic voice by studying homeless people in New York, his stomach dropped. For months of work, erased like it never happened," Duvall said. "Not once did he mention our conversations." That was the moment the respect died. The final blow came in 1971 when both men were up for the lead in The French Connection. The part eventually went to Gene Hackman, but what happened behind the scenes scarred Duvall for good. "That was when I stopped taking his calls," he admitted. "I realized some people never stop taking from others. They just get better at pretending it's collaboration." And insiders say Duvall wasn't exaggerating. Multiple sources later confirmed his story, claiming that during casting, Hoffman didn't just borrow ideas. He allegedly tried to sabotage Duvall's shot at the role altogether. He reportedly told director William Friedkin that Duvall was difficult and uncooperative, even pulling out old theater gossip as so-called proof. "That lie may have cost me a career-defining role," Duvall said firmly. That was the line, from competition to straight-up sabotage. Years later, Duvall confronted Hoffman about it, and that tense moment would reveal just how far their rivalry had truly gone. "He denied it," Duvall said flatly, "but I heard it straight from Friedkin himself." That was all the proof he needed. Still, despite the betrayal, Duvall never went public. Not then. He swallowed the anger, kept his composure, and played the game. He stood on the same stages as Hoffman, smiled for the cameras, shook hands at events, and even tossed out polite compliments about Hoffman's performances like nothing ever happened. That calm mask of professionalism fooled everyone, which makes his confession now hit twice as hard. Nobody in Hollywood had a clue that quiet hostility had been brewing for decades between two of the most respected actors of their generation. But as wild as the Hoffman story was, what came next blew the roof off the industry. The second name on Duvall's list? A man once thought untouchable, a legend whose talent had practically become myth. Marlon Brando. "The most destructive ego I ever encountered," Duvall declared. And this time, he didn't hold back for even a second. In Hollywood, great performances don't always come from great relationships, Duvall said sharply. Sometimes they survive in spite of terrible ones. His tone was cutting, his honesty brutal, and his words were dripping with decades of unspoken truth. "That's the reality of this business nobody ever talks about," he added, dropping one bombshell after another. When he finally said Brando's name out loud, even seasoned Hollywood insiders froze in disbelief. Marlon Brando, the Marlon Brando, the man the world calls one of the greatest actors of all time. Duvall didn't deny the man's genius. He was brilliant, no question, he admitted. But he was also the most destructive ego I ever encountered in this business. Brando wasn't just unpredictable, he was explosive, a force of chaos wrapped in charm and power, capable of turning a set upside down just to remind everyone he could. And when that power collided with Robert Duvall's discipline, sparks flew. Their clashes became legendary during the chaotic filming of The Chase in 1966. A movie that's mostly forgotten now, but whose cast was pure Hollywood royalty. Marlon Brando, Robert Duvall, Jane Fonda, and Robert Redford. Behind the camera, it was chaos disguised as art, and Duvall says it nearly broke him. Behind the shiny movie posters and glowing headlines, there was a full-blown psychological war raging on set. One that would permanently change how Robert Duvall saw acting, fame, and the meaning of professional respect. Duvall revealed that Marlon Brando had a twisted little habit, one that drove everyone around him insane. He'd change his performance every single take, Duvall said. He'd do it on purpose, just to make the editing impossible if he didn't like the director's vision. Brando called it protecting the integrity of the performance, but Duvall didn't mince words. He called it exactly what it was: professional sabotage. That toxic back and forth kept boiling until it finally erupted during one of the biggest scenes of Duvall's entire career, a powerful monologue that should have been his shining moment. But according to multiple crew members who later confirmed his story, Brando wasn't about to let that happen quietly. Right in the middle of Duvall's takes, Brando started making faint, barely audible noises off camera, just loud enough for the microphones to pick up. A cough here, a whisper there, a little laugh under his breath, and every take was ruined. By the fifth one, Duvall had had enough. After the fifth ruined take, I confronted him, Duvall recalled. What happened next burned itself into his memory forever. Brando just smirked, that famous smug grin everyone knew, and said, "Maybe you should be stronger in your choices." Duvall paused while retelling it, shaking his head. "That was Marlon," he said quietly. "He'd sabotage you, then make it look like your weakness. It was a power move, and a cruel one. The moment wasn't just about ego, it was a brutal reminder of how ruthless Hollywood could be when the cameras stopped rolling. And what makes this revelation so shocking is how completely it shatters the public image of their friendship. The so-called mutual respect between two of the greatest actors ever. For decades, Robert Duvall publicly praised Marlon Brando, calling him a genius, an icon, an inspiration, all while quietly carrying the sting of that bitter experience. He smiled through interviews, gave respectful quotes, and played the Hollywood game perfectly. But behind the scenes, that respect was mixed with something darker, disappointment that never really faded. Years later, fate would bring their names back together in the same cinematic universe, The Godfather. But here's the wild part. Despite both being major players in that masterpiece, they never shared a single scene together. At the time, people thought it was just coincidence, but now it feels intentional. I learned more from watching Marlon than from anyone else, Duvall admitted. But what I learned wasn't just about acting. I learned how not to treat colleagues. I learned that genius doesn't excuse cruelty. That raw honesty explained everything: his lifelong silence, his complicated respect, and the pain buried beneath it all. But before Hollywood could even recover from the Brando bombshell, Duvall dropped another name. And this one hit even closer to home. The third name on his list, James Caan. Competitive to the point of malice. This revelation stunned insiders because Duvall and Caan's chemistry in The Godfather was legendary. Caan's fiery, hot-tempered Sonny Corleone and Duvall's calm, calculating Tom Hagen created one of the most believable brotherly dynamics ever captured on film. "Jimmy and I built one of the most realistic brother relationships in movie history," Duvall said. "And we did it while barely speaking off camera. That's acting and intention at its finest." Their issues started early, right in rehearsals. Both men were powerhouse talents, each determined to shine brighter in a film packed with greatness. Duvall was the quiet craftsman, every move deliberate, every word measured. Caan, on the other hand, thrived on chaos, pure fire, full of energy, sometimes too much energy. Jimmy was competitive to the point of malice, Duvall admitted. He'd deliberately try to upstage everyone, especially me. Whenever Duvall had an important line, Caan would suddenly start tapping his fingers, playing with props, or throwing exaggerated gestures just to pull attention toward himself. What the audience saw on screen as brotherly tension was, in reality, something far more personal, a clash of egos hidden behind flawless performances. And according to Duvall, that rivalry didn't stop once the cameras cut. It followed them long after The Godfather wrapped. Anything to pull focus, anything to steal the spotlight, that was James Caan's move every time. And the tension between him and Robert Duvall finally exploded during that legendary family meeting scene, the one where the Corleones argue about going to war. What looked like pure brotherly heat on screen was actually raw, real rivalry behind the camera. Nobody in Hollywood had a clue that the chemistry everyone praised was fueled by genuine competition, and it almost wrecked one of the greatest films ever made. Tension hit its absolute peak one afternoon on The Godfather set. Duvall was quietly talking with director Francis Ford Coppola about Tom Hagen's motivations, just a normal, creative discussion, when suddenly James Caan stormed in with that trademark smirk. He tossed out some snide comment about overthinking glorified secretary roles, Duvall recalled. That was the moment everything changed. "I decided right there," Duvall said, "we'd never be friends." From that day forward, Duvall made a deliberate choice. Tom Hagen would always keep a watchful eye on Sonny in every scene. And that detail gave their on-screen relationship a spark so real, it burned through the camera. That calm, strategic energy versus Caan's wild intensity. It wasn't just acting, it was truth disguised as performance. What blows people's minds most is how perfectly the two men covered it all up for decades. Duvall and Caan fooled everyone, smiling side by side at reunions, laughing through interviews, radiating brotherly love on red carpets. They played their parts off screen just as flawlessly as they did in front of the lens. When we were promoting the film, we both knew what was at stake, Duvall said. We weren't going to let personal issues ruin something that important. So we smiled, told the right stories, and played our parts. Then he added with a sharp little grin, "That was real acting." Not the kind that wins Oscars, but the kind that earns respect. That quiet professionalism, that ability to put the craft before the ego, says more about Robert Duvall's character than any award ever could. And maybe that's why these feuds stayed buried for so long, hidden under decades of rehearsed affection, red carpet smiles, and perfectly timed photo ops. The truth was there the whole time. We just didn't see it until Duvall finally decided to drop the mask. While Duvall's clashes with Brando and Caan were rooted in professional chaos, his fourth revelation cut much deeper. This one was personal, and when he dropped the final name, it sent a shockwave through Hollywood's golden heart. The last name on Robert Duvall's list, Robert Redford, the fraud behind the golden image. The moment those words left his mouth, you could almost hear the gasp echo across the industry. For decades, Redford had been untouchable, the golden boy of American cinema, the perfect mix of elegance, intellect, and integrity. He wasn't just a star, he was a symbol of art, activism, and authenticity. To fans, he was the ideal man both on and off screen. But according to Duvall, that entire image was an illusion. Redford built the perfect public persona, Duvall said, the serious craftsman, the idealist, the man of principle, but the reality I experienced was something else entirely. Behind that charming smile and calm voice, Duvall claimed, was a cold opportunist, someone who treated crew members like furniture and saw fellow actors as obstacles standing in his way. Their feud started during the 1984 classic The Natural. Duvall played Max Mercy, the cynical sports columnist opposite Redford's heroic baseball legend, Roy Hobbs. On paper, it should have been a dream pairing, two titans of American cinema side by side. But what should have been easy collaboration turned into quiet war. Duvall began to notice Redford's attitude toward the crew. Long, unnecessary delays that didn't come from creative preparation, but pure disregard. Whole teams would stand around for hours, Duvall recalled. Not because he was deep in character, but because he was on the phone handling business deals while everyone else just waited. He didn't hold back. That's not artistry, Duvall said sharply. That's arrogance. As filming dragged on, the energy on set grew heavier, the tension between them so sharp it practically buzzed in the air. Ironically, that real-life friction bled right into their performances, giving their scenes the same edge that made The Natural unforgettable. Audiences loved the electric chemistry, but no one knew how real it was. Behind those perfectly lit frames and polished smiles, Duvall said Redford's so-called artistic integrity hid something much colder, a self-serving agenda carefully wrapped in class and charm. And now, after years of silence, Duvall was finally ready to say it out loud. He kept pushing Barry Levinson to cut my role, Duvall alleged, his voice steady but sharp. He argued that the scenes where Max Mercy challenged Roy Hobbs's legend weren't necessary. But I saw right through it. According to Duvall, it became painfully clear that Redford couldn't stand sharing the spotlight. He saw any strong presence opposite him as a threat, Duvall said. This wasn't about serving the story, it was about making sure he dominated every single frame. The irony of it all was brutal. On screen, Redford played a baseball hero whose reputation was being questioned by a journalist. But behind the scenes, he was allegedly trying to silence that very same journalist's voice in the movie. What infuriated Duvall the most wasn't just the ego, it was the hypocrisy. The gap between who he pretends to be and how he really acts is massive, Duvall reportedly told his interviewer. The man preaches collaboration, but behind the scenes, he's calculating every move to protect himself. Duvall didn't stop there. He'd stand on stage at Sundance preaching about artistic purity, he said sharply. Then he'd show up on set demanding final cut privileges and veto power over other actors' scenes. That contrast, the saint in the spotlight versus the tyrant behind the camera, left Duvall stunned. To him, it was the ultimate case of Hollywood double standards. For years, audiences saw Redford as the ideal, calm, wise, gracious. But behind that golden image, Duvall saw something entirely different, a man obsessed with control. The tension between them grew so thick that even the crew could feel it. Every conversation became a power game, every note from the director a quiet test of dominance. What the public saw as two cinematic icons working in harmony was, in truth, a Cold War. Pride versus principle, fame versus integrity. But the moment that sealed everything, the one Duvall said he'd never forget, came later, during post-production on The Natural. That was when he finally realized just how far Redford was willing to go to keep his image spotless, even if it meant rewriting the story to erase everyone else's shine. Duvall finally had enough. And he confronted Robert Redford face to face about all the behind-the-scenes manipulation that had been boiling for weeks. What happened next, witnessed by several crew members, burned itself into Duvall's memory forever. Redford just looked at me, Duvall recalled, and said, "You're a character actor, Bob. I'm a movie star. We're not playing by the same rules." That line hit him like a gut punch, sharp, cold, and unforgettable. That moment, Duvall said quietly, crystallized everything, the fraud behind the golden image. I never looked at him the same way again. Those words, simple but devastating, shook Hollywood to its core. From one Robert to another, it wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a full-blown crack in the myth of Hollywood's so-called good guys. The polished legends everyone thought were untouchable suddenly looked human and deeply flawed. The golden aura that had surrounded Redford for decades started to dim, and the industry couldn't ignore the cracks anymore. Within days of Duvall's explosive interview, Hollywood went into total chaos, shock, denial, whispers, and quiet confirmation, all swirling at once. Representatives for Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, the only two still living actors Duvall had named, quickly released carefully worded statements. Both expressed surprise at his comments, while also insisting they had deep respect for his legacy. The responses sounded polite, maybe too polite. Behind closed doors, though, the tone was very different. Insiders began quietly backing up Duvall's story, one piece at a time. Crew members from The Natural came forward confirming Redford's controlling behavior on set, saying they'd seen him delay scenes and override directions firsthand. Then a former assistant director from The Godfather added fuel to the fire, confirming what many had long suspected. Yeah, the tension between Duvall and Caan was real. Even Francis Ford Coppola himself gave a statement that made everyone sit up and listen. The chemistry you see on screen sometimes comes from very complicated personal dynamics behind the camera, he said carefully. That single line was as close to confirmation as Hollywood ever gives, and the ripple effect didn't stop there. Sources close to Duvall revealed that several big-name actors had privately reached out to thank him for saying what so many had been too afraid to say for decades. After 60 years of silence, Robert Duvall didn't just tell his truth. He cracked open Hollywood's polished surface and showed everyone what really hides beneath the glow. Finally, someone said what we've all been thinking, but never had the guts to say out loud. One actor reportedly told a friend after Duvall's shocking confession hit the headlines. He spoke for a lot of us, another admitted quietly. The message was loud and clear. Robert Duvall's courage had cracked something open in Hollywood. After years of silence and fake smiles, someone had finally said the truth out loud. And it changed everything. As for Duvall himself, those close to him say he seems lighter now. Not angry, not bitter, just free. After decades of keeping things bottled up, he's not out for revenge. He's simply setting the record straight. In a short follow-up statement, Duvall explained it perfectly. My goal was never to hurt anyone's legacy, but to correct a version of history that's been polished into fiction. He continued, I've given 60 years to this industry and I've always treated it with respect. Part of that respect means being honest about the good and the bad. Duvall didn't sugarcoat anything. He made it clear these weren't minor arguments or one-off creative clashes. They were long-term patterns that shaped productions, influenced careers, and changed lives. These truths deserve to be part of the record, he said firmly. Not just the shiny version we all agreed to pretend was real. Now, as Hollywood scrambles to process the fallout, one haunting question hangs in the air like smoke drifting over Sunset Boulevard. Does Robert Duvall have more to reveal? Because his final words in that interview stopped everyone cold. They were short, cryptic, and chilling. Those four stood out. But they weren't alone. Just like that, the 94-year-old legend stood up, thanked the interviewer, and walked out, leaving Hollywood staring at its reflection in the mirror he just shattered. Maybe, after all these years of cover-ups, fake smiles, and carefully curated legends, it's finally time for the myths to fall and for the truth to take center stage. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this shook you, and don't forget to subscribe. Because the stories aren't over yet, and the next chapter might be the most explosive one of all.